Hi, everyone. This is HENNESYS DISLA with the ArmHug podcast, and I am here with another special guest, Kayla Woolley, which is the founder and CEO of Staff on Tap. She's going to tell us a little bit about how she got started, and she's going to walk us through some of the things that she's learned. And I'm excited because she's also the youngest guest that I've had on this podcast, because I want you guys to see a little bit from diverse perspectives what it's like to grow a business right now in the healthcare market. So, Kaylee, get us started. How
Yeah.
did this idea come about?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me today. I'm excited to talk about Staff on Tap and what's coming down the pike for our future tech. But my story starts a little bit farther back. I grew up working in my family business of nursing homes. Over 60 years ago, my grandmother was a nurse in Hartford and had the opportunity to buy a little piece of land in the countryside of Connecticut with a house and a little nursing home next to it. So she moved her 11 children and husband there, and herself and her children ran the nursing home. So they did everything: cooking, cleaning, clinical, administrative, and my father even helped with doing the books. At one point, he actually moved into the nursing home because their house was just too packed with 11 children. So that's how my family business started. And then it's grown over the past 60 years from there. So every conversation I can remember since I was little at the dinner table was about quality of care or census or what's the future of senior care. And so after college, I became a nursing home administrator in Rhode Island. So I oversaw a home that had 60 patients and about 70 staff members. While I was there, I really fell in love with implementing strategic programs, so cardiopulmonary
Yeah.
programs, memory care programs, but I had a really hard time improving the quality of care, and it was because of staffing. I couldn't find a nurse to work in my building in 8 hours from now, let alone implement these lofty programs that would improve the quality of care. So at that point, I did some work as business development and then went back to school to study the staffing patterns further. So I got my master's of public health from the Yale School of Public Health, where I did a lot of research on staffing patterns, did internships on a national level with nursing homes and senior care facilities, and quickly realized this staffing crisis of nurses wasn't just a Connecticut problem or Rhode Island problem. It's pervasive across the United States.
Wow.
There really wasn't one facility that I've ever spoken to that said, "Oh, I have great staffing. It doesn't keep me up at night." And so at that point, I knew I wanted to create a business model that would help the staffing shortage in nursing homes. I'd never started a business before, so I went to Cornell to get my MBA, where I spent that time doing lots of customer discovery and understanding why 240,000 caregivers left nursing homes just in 2 years of the pandemic, and asking them, why did you leave and what would make you come back? That when I built Staff on Tap's business model around these nurses, because what I found they wanted was they were burnt out from working full time in nursing homes. It was
Mhm.
low pay, forced to work too many hours, and constantly working at facilities that were short staffed. And so I built Staff on Tap's business model to offer flexibility. They decide when and where they want to work. They can decide their hours. There's no minimum. There is a maximum, but no minimum. And they also set their pay rate. So it's really on the nurses' terms to dip their toe back in senior care without committing to that full time again. And so I officially launched Staff on Tap March of 2022. We had one nurse and one nursing home in Connecticut. We now have 115 nurses and 33 nursing homes, and have done about 1.3 million in total services in the last 12 months.
That's
So,
awesome.
sorry, a long answer to your question, but that's a snapshot of how we got to where we are now.
Yeah, no, and that shows that, with the demand, you guys just keep feeding. It's almost like this market's asking for that flexibility. I keep hearing a lot of people talk about work schedules or either too late or too early. And do you ever have an issue with anything like that? Do you have too many nurses trying to get into one time slot, or have you ever seen that?
Sure. Figuring out the marketplace model has definitely been a learning experience, balancing, okay, we now have this many nursing homes and this many
Right.
nurses, and really finding out what that correct ratio is. We
Right.
work with nurse aides, licensed practical nurses, and registered nurses. And honestly, what I found is that we cannot keep up with the nursing home demand, regardless of how many nurses we bring in. This is how bad the problem is in nursing homes. And the government's actually implementing higher regulated staffing levels on a state and federal level. So more nurses are needed. In Connecticut, this just passed March 1st. And so as soon as the nursing homes get their staff all set, they now have to have even more staff to stay in compliance. So our emphasis is on bringing on more nurses, because I know that there's just always going to be those nursing home schedule holes that we'll need to fill. The ratio, I'm a first-time founder, new to marketplaces, but the ratio we've found has worked is about 1 nursing home to 4 nurses or caregivers.
Wow. And why do you think that is? Why do you think we can't get that right?
And do you mean for the marketplace or?
The ratio.
Yeah, the ratio is tricky because the nursing home census, how busy they are, ebbs and flows so much.
Right.
And I've actually found it's more about the time of year when they need more or less nurses. So, for example, around holidays, their full-time staff likes to take their PTO days. In the summer, they want to go on vacation with their kids. In January, nursing home census spikes because seniors tend to go to nursing homes in December and January. So as we're going, I'm learning about how to balance that nursing home to nurse ratio, but it seems like it's most correlated with the time of year, which is interesting. You probably wouldn't, I know I didn't guess that when we first started this year ago.
Yeah, so that's like one of the little surprises that you find when you start growing your business, which I hope everybody listening has a better idea now that if you want to get into something, it probably is needed. If you need it, somebody probably else needs it. So can you talk a little bit about like what are some issues you feel that your services specifically are solving?
One area we really stand out is that, so there's lots of nurse temp staffing agencies, but we're
Yeah.
specific to nursing homes. So our tech, we're building it out more advanced now. We're on our MVP 2.0 currently, but it'll be able to integrate with nursing home systems. So there's scheduling, payroll, everything operations. And we also have a really strong vetting process of our nurses. We do drug tests, background check, references. They need at least 1 year experience in nursing homes. So we really make sure these nurses going in know what they're doing. And so that's a bit of the ways we differentiate. For our nurses, they like us for flexibility, but also because we're high quality. They know that other staff on tap nurses know what they're doing. They're going to show up on time. They're going to give a high quality care, and they like to be a part of that ecosystem versus some other agencies that just will hire a warm body. And they can be embarrassed to work for those agencies because when their coworker doesn't show up or leaves early, that reflects, or they feel it reflects on them as well. So that's why our word of mouth referrals have been incredible. I barely have Indeed ads out, and we have about 80% of those 115 nurses are word of mouth. We've also had 600 additional applications that are in the onboarding process right now.
Wow. Yeah, no, that's a lot of nurses. And I think you mentioned several different locations. Is it mostly on the East Coast or West Coast, or is that on your website? How would people learn more about where you guys are or where they can find you?
Currently, we're just in Connecticut. You have to do some paperwork to go across state lines. Next is Massachusetts. So currently we're just in Connecticut because going across state lines does require paperwork. Next is Massachusetts. Some of our current nursing home partners have sister facilities across state lines in Massachusetts. And so that'll be where we're going into next.
So do you see yourself continuing to roll out like in different states, or do you find that that's a little more difficult?
Absolutely. While I was building Staff on Tap over these last 12 months, I identified a bigger problem in the staffing industry and with the nursing homes relationship. So in Connecticut alone, there's over 200 temp nurse staffing agencies for nursing homes, which
Wow.
is crazy. Connecticut's a very small state.
Yeah.
And all of these are on different systems, some paper, some electronic. And so these nursing homes are like, I already have 5 contracts. I want to work with you, Staff on Tap, but I just can't deal with another system. And so we're rolling out tech that'll be a complement to Staff on Tap. It's going to be called Nurse Ranger, that will complement Staff on Tap and help us scale a lot faster. So our tech will still be able to integrate with the nursing home systems, but really make it easier for these nursing homes to access 100 staffing agencies rather than just 5. And so we'll be able to then do Staff on Tap and Nurse Ranger across the US faster than I currently am able to go.
Right. So you're saying that they don't want to use another platform, but if they use yours, they'll just be able to search other nursing homes too. So it's almost like I'm trying to see what I could compare it to. Is there like, I guess, a membership or so, like, how does that work for people to, let's say they want to find a role in a specific nursing home in Connecticut? Do you do like the placement and all of the onboarding and all of that?
No, so we'll be working now. We'll still have our agency, but we'll be working with other agencies. So any of those 200 agencies could now go on Nurse Ranger and access any of the nursing homes that are in Nurse Ranger's contract or portfolio. Right now we have 33 nursing homes. And so then we'll be working with the staffing agencies. We'll also be making sure that there's quality assurance. There's some really horror stories of staffing agencies in nursing homes. An owner told me a bit ago that they sent him someone who didn't have a license. Another owner said that a staffing agency sent them a nurse that previously was in jail for stealing from the elderly because they're not doing the drug test, they're not doing the background checks, and nobody's holding these staffing agencies accountable.
Right.
So with Nurse Ranger, we're going to implement a standard of quality and also give these nursing homes access to more agencies rather than just depending on 5 like they currently are.
And I guess to your point, like, how do we debunk all of these rumors about like working at nursing homes or even having patients in nursing homes is a negative thing? Like, do you think that you would also have to, I guess, as part of the training, when you bring people on board, you talk to them about finding positive ways to talk about nursing homes? Because it really is something where I keep seeing every day how people would prefer to have the nurse come into the patient's home as opposed to having the patient go to a nursing home. But I mean,
Yeah, I think a big problem is the short staffing. I mean, it's really hard to improve the
be
quality of care and advance and innovate when you don't have enough staff to meet the regulated staffing levels. And that's been a major hindrance in moving the industry forward. There is movement of people getting more care in the home, which I am all for. I mean, I would also want to stay in my own home as long as I can. It's a lot harder to regulate. So in home care, my husband actually owns a home health agency. So I've had a look into this side as well. In a nursing home, the Department of Public Health does an intense annual survey once a year. They're constantly in your building, keeping track of your metrics, infection control. Nursing homes are very regulated. It's been often cited that nursing homes are the second most regulated industry in the country, the first being nuclear power. And so these nursing homes are so heavily regulated, but now we're having patients go into the home. And are we going to regulate that as heavily? Are we going to make sure that the infection control is there, that the training is there, that, these patients are getting the right quality of care? So I do see care going into the home, but it's going to be a transition, and the government's going to need to figure out how we regulate that and keep the quality of care there.
Yeah. I think it's like what you're saying. Yeah, the reporting is where I think too, we're gonna have to learn how to do it from home. Like, how can you can't have someone all the time with reporting like, okay, this person's been here 7 times, I've already checked. Might need it, maybe. I mean, not to sound too futuristic, but robots,
Yeah.
cameras. How else are people going to be able to prove that they've been somewhere without just signing a paper? I've been there.
Right. And I think robots, I was actually just at a healthcare conference this past week where they talked about robots in the healthcare space. And I think they could be really beneficial in taking over tasks that we don't need a human to do. We can have a robot do this so that humans can do the things that they're good at in terms of nurses and doctors and everything. That's aside, but yeah, just an interesting topic for the future of senior care.
Yeah. So what do you think has been one of the hardest things you've had to do for your business at this moment?
I would say, as a first-time founder, you don't know what you don't know. I have hit so many things where I'm like, oh my God, I didn't know I had to do this. I mean, very early on, I was like, I need to charge sales tax. I didn't end up having to, but little panics like that, just growing pains every time you hit them. I have very strong mentors, and I rely a lot on those mentors, a lot on other founders, because the problems that I'm facing, like cash flow for operations, getting a loan when you're really early on, pitching for money, I've relied on those mentors and other colleagues and other founders to get through those tough spots. I had a difficult team transition 2 weeks ago, and one of my mentors walked me through it. We actually did a role play of, okay, how is this conversation going to happen? And so I think having a strong network of peers has gotten me through those hard moments. There's still so many more coming, but I know to just be open and honest and communicate with the people who are there to, and they like to support you. So I don't have a specific thing in mind, but I would just say it's all the firsts that I've experienced.
Yeah. And I mean, you think about it all the time. So it's like what you're saying, having someone there to talk through it and support you, and hear what you're going through. Sometimes you just need a soundboard. It's like, okay, I'm not going crazy, am I? I'm just going to go ahead and spill what's inside of my head and stop just thinking about it and not taking action. So I think what you're saying is so important, because on here I try to talk a lot about, or with, mentors and how people are trying to start businesses and don't understand how important that support is, especially if you don't have it, you've never done it. And I guess for you now, I know that you are also part of the fellowship, so that's how I met Kayla, but are there other programs that you're looking into that help you, or that help you think a lot of healthcare businesses scale?
In terms of healthcare businesses, I would say that's when I talk to other healthcare founders who are ahead of me. One of my angel investors, he's is the CEO of Grow Therapy, and he's years ahead of me. And so talking to people like that, keeping ear to the ground. And I also think just keeping in touch with your customers. Like, my facilities are in this every day. They know way more than I could probably read in an article. In terms of healthcare and the changes, senior care is constantly changing. And so I try to go to a lot of the conferences. I'm technically still a provider, family owner operator. And so just this spring, I'm actually going to 3 different nursing home conferences where they talk about regulations coming down the pike, or innovations or tech that we can implement. But I think in having a lot of different sources where you get your information, and then filtering through it and understanding what's valuable to you. I've also been doing accelerator programs. When I was at Cornell, I was at a part of eLab, which was a year-long, got class credit to build your business, and then the Blackstone Launchpad Fellowship last summer. So got my tech and startup information from there, and then the healthcare from the healthcare professionals.
Yeah. So I like that you say that there's like a diverse or a wide range of resources, because that's exactly right. That's how I think of it too. Like, I'm thinking, okay, this person can help me with a lot of like the business and financial cost analysis stuff, and then this person helped me with a lot of the tech stuff. So I mean, and that's okay to do that. It's almost like you're piecemealing your idea and you're trying to make everybody try to understand it. That's cool. It's like a little puzzle. Okay, so I guess, like, any advice for people who might be thinking about starting a like staffing agency, like what you're doing right now, besides having the passion, because obviously you're excited about senior care, but anything that you feel that maybe you went through and you would have done differently?
I think because I relied on mentors so much and accelerator programs, I avoided a lot of mistakes that I would have made as a first-time founder. And I think one big one is I'm risk adverse. And so I spent a long time before I actually launched Staff on Tap in customer discovery, really figuring out who my customers were, what their main pain points were, and what they wanted me to build. And I think if you doing a staffing agency or anything in healthcare, any startup in general, spending that time to understand your customer, because I came from the nursing home world and there were still things that I thought they wanted that they didn't actually want, because the end user wasn't who I thought it was. So I would just say, taking the time before you put that money into it, before you put all of your time into it, doing effective customer discovery interviews and de-risking the business, because I had maybe 5 different ideas before Staff on Tap in different places in senior care that for one reason or another through customer discovery, I understood, okay, this is not going to be viable. There's no one to pay for it. The end user doesn't really care. It's not a big enough pain point for them to purchase this system or product that I'm building. And so I was lucky that I didn't pursue those for the last year.
Yeah, no, I agree, right? You have to test, you have to do a trial, and then figure out whether or not it's worth your time. So you've talked about a lot of the great things that you've learned. Can you talk a little bit about some of the negatives in business that you feel you've had to kind of overcome, whether it's like having people understand your idea or maybe putting trust in a partner and then finding out or getting disappointed? How do you deal with those things?
I think the hardest thing for me was building enough confidence to do Staff on Tap full time when I was at ground zero, when I had nothing, no proof of concept, and even changing my LinkedIn title to say founder and CEO of Staff on Tap. That was a really hard jump for me. And then going to fundraise and pitching this idea that I didn't know if it was going to work. I mean, I of course de-risked it. I did as much as I could, but you don't know if it's what it's going to look like in 12 months. And I am someone who's what you see is what you get. Like the numbers I put on my pitch deck, I'm going to hit. But that's not what in fundraising, what you're supposed to do. You're supposed
Right.
to, oh, well, this is a venture backable. This is what our numbers are going to be. And so I think building up that confidence to sell my business when it wasn't really business, because I came from a business, my family business that had been around for 60 years. I mean, that's great proof of concept, but
Right.
on Tap didn't exist. And so that was, I think, the hardest thing for me to do that I've had to build over this last year.
That's amazing. And yes, I agree with everything you said, finding that confidence, like how I think just by doing it, and then you're going to doubt yourself a million times. But sometimes, that's just a little fear that pops in your head and tells you, are you sure you want to do this? But it's almost like you have to talk yourself through it.
Right.
I think there's a lot of that, and people just they underestimate how much change is happening. Like for you to catch up on all the change that's going on, you're like, I need to slow the brakes, but I can't because it's business is moving, right? Um, yeah. So I completely agree with you.
I think
So
you also get the right people in your court. Like I'm
yeah,
not someone who's going to say something that I don't like the numbers. I'm not going to tell you numbers I don't think I can hit. And we did get venture backing in January, and my investors are incredible. They know me, we understand each other. And so now they can go to partners they've worked in the past and advocate for me. And I've had a
yes,
lot of success in fundraising through that. Like someone who knows someone who's like, look, Kayla's the real deal. This is what she's building. This is what she's done. And her numbers, she's on the conservative side, she's risk adverse, but you should invest in her. And that has gone a long way. And so I'm glad I found investors that match who I am and understand that, because I'm never going to be someone who, tells you, oh, next year we'll sell for $1 billion. Like
I
that's just
know.
who I am.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's a great way of like pivoting to the next question that I had, which was like how honest you need to be with these investors that everybody is capable of just pitching the idea, right? And a million people are going to want to try to do it too. But it's amazing how many people actually don't move forward with it. So if you're listening, you're probably thinking like, I have this idea, and you're probably the one person who's going to do it because so many people stop, quit, decide, you know what, this isn't for me. But if you're really passionate about it and you're thinking about it all the time, getting people in your corner won't be too difficult because they're probably just as passionate or excited about your idea. So, I mean, I'm curious to know a little bit about, so you talk a lot about fundraising. Were you afraid of separating your personal finances with the business? Like, what was that conversation like? Or how have you adapted to that?
I'm very scrappy. I come from two parents who were small business owners that were like, when are we becoming EBITDA positive? So I did a lot of pitch competitions. As a student, people love to give money in pitch competitions to students. So I tried to fund the business as much as I could through non-dilutive accelerator programs like Blackstone or eLab at Cornell, and then also pitch competitions. We actually just won a $25,000 grant last week. So
Yeah.
doing that, I knew I was going to be broke for a while. I mean, doing a
Yep.
startup, I was a graduate student for 3 years, so that wasn't anything new to me. But yeah, you don't pay yourself for a long time, but the experience, I think, even if Staff on Tap goes belly up and Nurse Ranger goes belly up, the experience I've taken away from this is so invaluable. And I don't think it ever gets easier to just quit everything and start a business. I mean, you might say, oh, like next year I'll be in a better position, but it really doesn't get easier. So I'm glad if any students are listening, the best advice that I got was start a business while you're in school, because even if it doesn't work out, you're still going to graduate with that degree. And so I'm so happy that I did start this while I was in school. My grades weren't great, but I got my business out the door.
No, you're doing amazing things. So Kayla, thank you so much. That was the last question I had. Do you want to add anything? Any plugs? I'll definitely put all of your information below this video so that people can definitely check it out, because I'm sure that people are going to want to learn a little bit more about what you're building or be a part of this.
Yeah, I was going to say down the line, as we build out Nurse Ranger, I will be bringing more people onto our team. We'll be expanding mostly in the sales roles. But if anyone's interested in learning more about Staff on Tap or Nurse Ranger, or has connections to nursing homes, or would maybe want to join our team down the line, feel free to reach out and I would love to chat.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I appreciate your time, and I know that you're super busy, so I look forward to connecting more though.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time.